Chapter 1. Miss Sutton, I've drafted the merger agreement. Please take a look. The city lights began to twinkle on outside the window, sketching the skyline of New York. Scarlett Sutton pulled her gaze back, a faint, bitter smile playing on her lips. Change it to a divorce agreement. The words fell, and the office plunged into a dead silence. Only the cold air from the central air conditioning flowed silently. Behind her, Assistant Smith clearly froze, the pen in her hand dropping onto the polished marble floor with a crisp clatter. "What did you say?" "I said." Scarlett turned around, her slender eyebrows framing eyes that were usually sharp but now unnervingly calm. "I want to divorce Ethan Bancroft." Assistant Smith's mouth fell open. "But, as far as I know, you and the Bancroft heir were never. We married 3 years ago," Scarlett cut her off, her voice low. "We just never made it public." Her gaze fell on the merger agreement on her desk. "Format the divorce papers to look like the merger documents." Scarlett's eyes were fixed on the merger proposal on the desk. "Just put it in the appendix." This merger, a sensation across the country, would be the perfect cover to end her marriage. The deal had been in negotiations for 6 months and was finally at the critical signing stage. The Bancroft Group wanted to acquire her tech company, Stellar Tech, and as the project lead, Ethan Bancroft would certainly be at the board meeting tomorrow. The opportunity was tomorrow. Assistant Smith quickly composed herself and began to explain the divorce proceedings in detail. Scarlett seemed to be listening intently, but her mind was on her plan for the next day. She would have him unwittingly sign the divorce papers, hidden within this all-important merger agreement. Under the lamplight, Assistant Smith quickly drafted the agreement. As she handed it over, Scarlett's gaze fell on the signature line on the final page, her fingers trembling slightly. In that moment, a flood of memories washed over her. That rainy day 3 years ago, they had quietly gotten their marriage license at City Hall. Back then, she believed that if she just gave him enough time and space, he would eventually accept their marriage. But 3 years had passed, and he had always maintained a delicate distance, treating her with a politeness that was forever detached. Taking a deep breath, Scarlett signed her name to the agreement. Her penmanship was elegant, yet imbued with an indescribable finality. The next morning, the financial district was bustling. Scarlett arrived at the conference room half an hour early and cleverly slipped the divorce agreement into the middle of the merger documents. At 9 o'clock sharp, Ethan Bancroft appeared. He wore a dark blue suit that accentuated his tall, straight posture. His hair was impeccably combed, revealing a smooth forehead. A ring adorned his long fingers, but it wasn't their wedding ring. No one would have guessed that this formidable acquirer was her husband, and no one knew that his heart belonged to another woman. Beneath his gentle exterior was a joy he couldn't suppress. Scarlett knew it was because Rachel Dawson was in the audience, smiling up at him. As she pushed the merger documents in front of him, Scarlett's fingers trembled slightly. "Sign this, and the company is yours." The document was a hefty 200 pages, and the divorce agreement was hidden in the final appendix. Ethan flipped through the pages distractedly, his eyes darting towards Rachel in the audience from time to time. Watching him calmly sign his name on the divorce agreement, Scarlett gave a bitter smile. He didn't even notice what he was signing. Just like their 3-year marriage, he had never taken it seriously. Their marriage began with a blind date. At the time, Ethan was just recovering from the blow of Rachel's marriage, while she had been secretly in love with him for a full decade. On the day they got their license, he proposed keeping the marriage a secret. She agreed without a second thought. To be with him, she would accept any condition. Seeing the dazed look on his face as he stared at Rachel, Scarlett's hand, holding a pen, turned white at the knuckles. She handed him the organized documents, her gaze falling on his long, strong fingers. As expected, he didn't even look, signing his name in every spot she had marked. He had always been like this, careless with anything she handed him. It wasn't until the sound of his steady footsteps disappeared down the hall that Scarlett slowly unclenched her fists. She took a photo from her purse, their wedding photo from 3 years ago. In the picture, his smile was so forced, as if he were merely completing a task. As she tore the photo to shreds, Scarlett remembered the encrypted album she had seen on his phone the night before. It was filled with pictures of Rachel, from her spirited early days as an entrepreneur to the glamorous CEO she was today, not a single one missing. The latest addition was a screenshot of Rachel's social media post announcing her divorce. The caption was simple: "A new beginning." That night, the usually restrained Ethan had gotten drunk for the first time. His normally gentle eyes were filled with an irrepressible joy. In that moment, Scarlett finally understood. He had never truly moved on from that relationship. This secret marriage was just a shelter for him to escape reality, and she had only ever been a dispensable substitute. Walking out of the conference room, Scarlett overheard the secretaries whispering, "Miss Dawson is finally divorced. I wonder if she'll get together with Mr. Bancroft." They grew up together, a perfect couple. A match made in heaven. A cold smile touched Scarlett's lips. Yes, a match made in heaven. "Ethan Bancroft, you'll get your wish soon enough. Once this 1-month cooling-off period is over, you can stand by her side openly. No longer bound by this marriage, no longer needing to feign interest in my existence, no longer having to suppress your feelings for her. From today on, I set you free." Chapter 2. The ballroom in the financial district was ablaze with lights. The party celebrating the successful merger was in full swing. "Miss Sutton, this merger is the talk of the town to you." Amid the clinking of glasses, Scarlett raised her cup and drained it. The glass contained plain water, but no one knew, including Ethan Bancroft, who stood not far away. Even if he did know, he wouldn't care. He was surrounded by a group of investors, his conversation and laughter showcasing the elegance of a man born to wealth. The light from the crystal chandelier cast shadows on his handsome profile, making him look as beautiful as an oil painting. Scarlett watched this scene, a bitter smile on her lips. This dazzling Ethan Bancroft had never belonged to her. His eyes and heart were always for someone else. A gasp went through the crowd near the Champagne Tower. Rachel Dawson had appeared in the ballroom at some point. Holding a glass of champagne, she walked with determination towards Ethan. Watching their intimate display, as if no one else existed, Scarlett began to feign drunkenness. She swayed as she stood up, and Ethan's gaze followed her. "That's enough. Stop drinking," he said, steadying her arm. He then smiled apologetically at the crowd. "Miss Sutton is a bit overjoyed today. I'll take her to rest." In the elevator, Scarlett leaned against the cold metal wall, closing her eyes against the swaying ascent. Ethan's attention was already captured by his phone. In her peripheral vision, she saw his screen. He was messaging Rachel about something, a pleasant smile on his face, completely oblivious to her pale complexion. The faint scent of his cologne, a gift from Rachel for his birthday, became pungent in the enclosed space. He loved it and wore it almost every day. The expensive watch she had given him, however, remained in the bottom drawer of his study, never worn. The moment the door to the presidential suite closed, Ethan's arm wrapped around her. Scarlett leaned back slightly, using her feigned drunkenness to laugh slurrily. "Let me take a shower first?" "I'll help you," he said, reaching to undo her jacket. She pressed his hand, silently refusing. Still pretending to be drunk, she slowly pulled away. "I'm so tired today. Let me be alone for a while." This subtle rejection was a perfect mirror of their 3-year marriage. Harmonious on the surface, but distant in reality. Ethan didn't press her, just gave a soft meh and turned to get some water. Watching his tall back, Scarlett closed her eyes. This time, the drunkenness was fake, but the feeling of her heart being dead ashes was real. Soon, when the divorce became final, even this kind of tenderness would be a thing of the past. She leaned back on the sofa, her eyes clear. No matter how close he was right now, his heart was always somewhere else. "Oh, right," Ethan suddenly remembered. "I haven't finished reading today's merger documents." Scarlett's heart clenched. She feigned deeper intoxication. "Dizzy, let's talk tomorrow." Before she could finish, his phone rang. The moment he saw the caller ID, he tensed. "Rachel, so late." "Ethan," a frantic voice came from the other end. "Sean has lost his mind. He brought people and smashed the company's servers, all the project data. Please come quickly." Ethan shot up, throwing on his jacket in a few quick strides. "Scarlett, I have to go to the office. Something's happened with Rachel." Seeing his urgency, Scarlett's drunkenness deepened. "Her ex-husband again?" "Yeah, he smashed the servers. The company's in chaos," Ethan explained as he put on his shoes. "I'll have the bodyguard stay with you, don't worry." Once the door closed, Scarlett's intoxication vanished. She pulled out her phone and, sure enough, saw Rachel's new post on her social media feed. It was a live video. She was standing on the company's rooftop, and Ethan's figure flashed by as he helped her deal with the server incident. Yesterday's darkness is past, a new journey is about to begin. Reading the meaningful text, Scarlett suddenly understood. The so-called server incident was just an excuse for them to meet. She laughed at herself, then walked to the closet. She took out everything she had ever given Ethan over the past 3 years, arranging them neatly in a box. This included the watch, its case now covered in a layer of dust. When Ethan returned, he saw her packing. "Why are you suddenly organizing all this? They're not needed anymore. I'm planning to donate them," Scarlett said without looking up. "All right," he said, glancing at the box. He didn't press further and went into the bathroom. Scarlett watched his back, her expression calm. If he had just opened the box and looked, he would have seen that these were all tokens of her love for him. But he did nothing. Just like their 3-year marriage, he had never truly cared about her feelings or actions. He didn't care about the meaning behind any of her gestures. The next morning, a junk collector came to the door. Watching the box full of her past love being taken away as trash, a sense of relief washed over Scarlett. Soon, when the divorce became final, it would all be over. Chapter 3. As the sunset streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows into the office, Scarlett Sutton was reviewing the post-merger data reports. Suddenly, she found she couldn't log into the system. "Sorry, Miss Sutton," the tech department called shortly after. "There's an issue with the server. We need Mr. Bancroft's authorization." Looking at Ethan Bancroft's busy figure in the office across the way, Scarlett gave a bitter smile. She had been deliberately avoiding him these past few days, but now it seemed she had to go to him in person. Walking through the glass corridor, she overheard the secretaries whispering. "I heard that for tonight's appreciation dinner, the chairman specifically requested that everyone bring a date." "I know, right? Everyone wants to see who Mr. Bancroft's mysterious girlfriend is. My guess is it's Miss Dawson. Look how well they worked together on this merger." She pushed open the door to Ethan's office. He was on the phone. Hearing her footsteps, he looked up, quickly ending the call. "Scarlett, what's up?" She handed him a slip of paper. "I need your authorization." As he was typing in the password, a message popped up in their work group chat. "All departments, please note, all supervisors are to attend tonight's appreciation dinner with a guest. Ethan Bancroft. Ethan, the entire financial circle is guessing who your other half is. You have to let us see tonight, right?" It was sent by Chairman Chen himself. Scarlett had received it too. The message was followed by a string of teasing emojis. Scarlett's fingers trembled slightly, but her gaze was fixed on Ethan's face. He was clearly stunned. He looked up at her with a hint of hesitation. "Why don't you come with me?" The question felt like a dull knife slowly twisting in Scarlett's heart. 3 years, and their marriage had always been a secret. Scarlett let out a bitter laugh. What was the point of acknowledging something now, when they were about to get divorced? Without a moment's thought, Scarlett refused. "I have a meeting with venture capitalists tonight," she forced a small smile. "Besides, you probably don't want to take me, do you?" Ethan opened his mouth but didn't deny it. His silence was like a heavy blow to Scarlett. She congratulated herself for not holding onto any illusions about him. "Just send me the data once it's fixed," she heard herself say as she turned away, her voice unnervingly calm. That night, the hotel was magnificent. As soon as Ethan arrived at the ballroom, he was surrounded by several board members. "Ethan, you need to find someone to take care of you." "Exactly. It would be a waste for someone like you to stay single. How about I introduce you to someone excellent?" Amid the clinking of glasses, Ethan quietly took out his phone. The top 2 contacts were Scarlett Sutton and Rachel. After a moment's hesitation, he tapped on the latter's chat. For the first time in 3 years, he had proactively invited her to such an event. Rachel Dawson soon appeared in the ballroom. She wore a black evening gown that outlined her graceful figure, exuding a captivating charm with every move. Everyone present cast admiring glances her way. The lively atmosphere was interrupted by Ethan's assistant. "Mr. Bancroft, bad news. It seems the merger documents have been leaked. There are already rumors online that..." Ethan quickly took the tablet and scanned the report. When he saw the words "divorce agreement," his hand trembled slightly. A sense of foreboding washed over him. His eyes darted around, searching for Scarlett. For the first time, he left Rachel's side and strode quickly towards Scarlett. "What is this?" He looked up and met Scarlett's calm eyes. She stood before the floor-to-ceiling window, dressed in a well-tailored business suit, her expression normal. An investor wanted to inquire about the divorce case. I had Assistant Smith make the introduction. It might have been accidentally included with the contract. He wanted to ask more, but a familiar voice came from behind him. "Ethan, the chairman is looking for you." Rachel naturally took his arm, and Ethan froze. He didn't dare to look at Scarlett's expression, but he couldn't bring himself to push Rachel away either. But Scarlett just nodded slightly, her tone distant and polite. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Bancroft. We can discuss business matters another time." As she turned away, she heard the whispers behind her. "It really is Miss Dawson. They're the most perfect couple in the financial world." Yes, Scarlett thought with a bitter smile, they were a match made in heaven. And she was just an accident that should never have happened. Chapter 4. After leaving, Scarlett returned to her office. Standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, she watched the lights in the opposite building go out one by one. The image of Ethan with his arm around Rachel replayed in her mind, the intimacy of the gesture stinging her heart. Perhaps the wound was too deep. She no longer felt the pain, only an endless exhaustion. There were still 30 days in the divorce cooling-off period. Why did it feel so long? The coffee on her desk had long gone cold. She rubbed her tired eyes and continued with the post-merger cleanup work. At 3 in the morning, Assistant Smith brought in the latest financial report. "Miss Sutton, here is the post-merger integration plan." Assistant Smith put down a stack of documents, hesitating. "You look terrible. Should you rest for a bit or maybe go to the hospital for a checkup?" "No need." She picked up the cold coffee, her gaze fixed on the building opposite. Through the glass curtain wall, the hotel lights were bright. Remembering the scene at the dinner, she suddenly found it ironic. 3 years of marriage, and to the outside world, she was just a competitor who had been acquired. But Rachel could walk by his side openly. At 3 in the morning, Scarlett finally finished the last document. She rubbed her temples and suddenly felt the world spin. Then a metallic taste rose in her throat. Her vision went black and she lost consciousness. "Miss Sutton," Assistant Smith looked up to see Scarlett cough up blood. Her body, curled into a ball, fell heavily from the chair. Assistant Smith rushed over, crying out, "Miss Sutton, hang in there, I've already called an ambulance in the private hospital room." The doctor frowned after the examination. "This is gastric bleeding, caused by long-term malnutrition and overwork. You've already fainted, which is very serious. Please contact her family to sign the consent forms. I need to arrange surgery for you as soon as possible." Scarlett stared at the number pinned at the top of her phone contacts. After a few seconds of hesitation, she dialed it. After a dozen missed calls, the screen remained on the dialing interface. "Perhaps Mr. Bancroft is busy with the Dawson's investment case?" Assistant Smith asked cautiously. "He's always busy." Scarlett's voice was weak. She gave a bitter smile. "Just like every night for the past 3 years. I'd cancel all my engagements to wait for him to come home for dinner, but he was with clients. I studied finance for a year to help him, but he said I was an outsider. I planned a month-long birthday surprise, but he changed his plans at the last minute to discuss a project. One has to learn to accept reality, right?" Assistant Smith quietly opened WhatsApp. The work group chat already had 99 unread messages. In the attached picture, Ethan was cutting a cake with Rachel. She glanced at the weak Scarlett and quietly turned off the screen. "But we need a family member's signature now," the doctor said, holding the admission notice with a grim expression. "No need," Scarlett closed her eyes. "In another half a month, he won't be my husband anymore." "Miss Sutton, I don't care what issues you have with your husband, but right now, he is still your legal husband." Scarlett's eyes held a hint of irony as she looked at the doctor seriously. "You saw it yourself. He's not answering my calls. If he remains unreachable, am I supposed to just wait here to die?" The doctor sighed and had Assistant Smith sign the papers. The surgery was successful, but Scarlett lay in the ICU for 5 days. Besides Assistant Smith, her room was empty. It wasn't until the 6th day that Ethan rushed in. He looked at the fluctuating data on the monitor, his brow furrowed. "Why didn't you tell me something this serious happened?" Scarlett looked at his immaculate hair and well-tailored suit, clearly fresh from a party. "You must have been very busy. The Dawson's acquisition case is more important than this little matter of mine." About that day, he seemed to want to explain. I hear Miss Dawson's divorce is finalized, Scarlett asked suddenly. Ethan was taken aback but nodded. Yes, it's all settled. Congratulations on the launch of the Dawsons' new venture. Her voice was very soft. I hope I can be as successful as her. Just as he was about to speak, his phone rang again. Seeing the caller ID, he hesitated for a moment before turning and walking into the hallway. When he returned half an hour later, he heard Scarlett's voice from the room. Don't worry about the board meeting. Once the divorce cooling-off period is over, everything should be settled. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He pushed the door open. What divorce cooling-off period? Chapter 5. Scarlett hadn't expected Ethan to overhear that. Fortunately, Assistant Smith was quick-witted and immediately interjected. Mr. Bancroft, Miss Sutton is helping me with my divorce. My husband and I have been having some marital problems lately. Yes, Scarlett added calmly. She's been having some marital issues, and I happen to have a friend who is an expert in this field. She asked me for a referral. The VIP room fell silent for a moment. Ethan's gaze shifted between the two of them, his intuition telling him that something wasn't right. But before he could speak, his phone rang again. The caller ID read, Rachel. He glanced at the screen, then at Scarlett's pale face, hesitating for a moment. Finally, he pursed his lips. I need to take this call. Watching him leave, Scarlett closed her eyes. The moment he chose to answer that call, it said everything. Miss Sutton. Assistant Smith began, her voice trailing off. It's fine, she said softly. It was bound to come out sooner or later. When Ethan returned, Scarlett was already propped up in bed, reading a document. His calm demeanor made her heart race. I just spoke with the doctor. He said you can be discharged next week. I'll come and pick you up then. Scarlett didn't look up. No need, just have the driver come. You're busy. The words were spoken naturally, but they made Ethan feel inexplicably guilty. He softened his voice, a tenderness he had never shown her before. Scarlett, I know you're still angry with me, but that day... Scarlett put down the document, her bright eyes fixed on him. Ethan's voice grew smaller under her gaze. Scarlett cut him off, saying, You don't need to explain. After the merger, you have a lot to do. I understand. Ethan breathed a sigh of relief and continued. But I am your husband, after all. So, when you're discharged, I'll come pick you up to make it up to you, okay? Hearing Ethan mention his status as her husband, Scarlett managed a faint smile. All right. She watched him smile weakly, wanting to say something but ultimately holding back. Remembering Rachel's call urging him to return, she simply nodded. Well, I'm heading back to the company. It's been busy with the post-merger work lately. Her tone was still gentle. Be careful on your way. A week later, Scarlett handled her own discharge from the hospital. A nurse, gossiping, asked why her stunningly handsome husband hadn't come to pick her up. She smiled wistfully. He's very busy. He doesn't need to come. I can manage on my own. Just before completing the paperwork, she scrolled through her social media and saw Rachel's vacation photos from the Bahamas, captioned, A much-needed escape. Thanks for the company. The sunlight in the photos was beautiful, and 2 sets of footprints were visible on the sand. She called Ethan. The sound of waves came from the other end. What's wrong? He asked, his voice a little flustered. Nothing, she said, leaning against the window. Just wanted to let you know I've been discharged. Oh, today, he paused. I'm sorry, I'm out of town on business. I was going to. On business in the Bahamas? She asked softly. There was a few seconds of silence on the other end. Yeah, a last-minute meeting. I see. She hung up after saying that. After finishing the discharge paperwork, Scarlett opened her calendar. 10 days left in the divorce cooling-off period. In 10 days, their marriage would be over. He could openly be with Rachel, and she would finally be free. Stepping out of the hospital, the bright sunlight shone on her face. Scarlett raised a hand to shield her eyes from the glare. For the first time, she felt that this concrete jungle was so vast. It turned out that after letting go of a relationship, even breathing became easier. Chapter 6. Although her stomach ailment had not fully healed, Scarlett Sutton had already begun to handle the relocation of Stellar Tech. After the merger, the company was to move into the financial district, sharing a building with the Bancroft Group. Miss Sutton, the equipment list has been verified, Assistant Smith said, walking in with a tablet. But your private office? Everything will proceed as planned, Scarlett said, tapping lightly on her keyboard, her gaze on the office being cleared out in the building opposite. The entire top floor was a hive of activity, with boxes, equipment, and documents piled up in the corridors. The engineering team was dismantling servers, and the sound of equipment being moved was incessant. When Ethan Bancroft hurried in, he froze at the doorway. He hadn't expected Scarlett to start the move so soon. "Is the new space in the financial district renovated already?" he asked, walking to the window and looking at the emptied office area. Miss Scarlett replied without looking up. "The new location is better suited for a tech company's development." Ethan changed the subject. "Assistant Smith said you had her clear out the top floor lounge. Wasn't that your favorite?" "It's not needed anymore," Scarlett cut him off, her voice soft. "Some habits need to be changed." He instinctively glanced at the basketball in the corner, a souvenir they had bought together at an NBA game last year. Now, it too was labeled to be disposed of. Just as he was about to say something, he noticed that the boxes being moved by the engineering team were filled with his things. Records of their collaboration, from the early stages of the merger to the present. "Where are your things?" "All taken care of." Hearing her crisp reply, Ethan assumed everything had been moved to the new office and didn't ask further. He checked the moving list, casually reminding her, "Make sure they label everything by category so things don't get mixed up." Scarlett watched his retreating back, words rising to her lips only to be swallowed back down. "They won't get mixed up, because in the new office there are only your things." By the time the last box was sealed, the city lights were on. Scarlett leaned against the wall, preparing to go downstairs, but ran into Rachel Dawson and her investment team at the elevator. Ethan hadn't expected to see her and was momentarily at a loss. He subconsciously let go of Scarlett's arm and took 2 steps forward. "What are you guys doing here?" "We heard you were moving," Rachel said with a smile. "We were just passing by and thought we'd see if you needed any help." Her gaze fell on Scarlett. "Sis Sutton, long time no see." Scarlett frowned for a moment but suppressed her impulse and extended her hand politely. "Miss Dawson, it has been a while." Rachel looked at her, smiling brightly. "Why don't we take this opportunity to have dinner together?" Scarlett glanced at Ethan's conflicted expression and shook her head slightly. "I'm not feeling well today, maybe another time." Ethan quickly helped her into the car. "I'll take you home to rest." He then turned to Rachel and said, "You guys go ahead, I'll join you later." In the basement garage, Scarlett spoke up. "I've already arranged for a car with Assistant Smith." She sidestepped his outstretched hand. "Your project meeting is more important." For some reason, Ethan felt she was being overly generous and distant. He racked his brain for an explanation. "No need to explain," Scarlett said first. As the elevator doors slowly closed, she saw his hesitant expression. "Didn't we agree from the start? We wouldn't tell anyone except our parents until we both felt it was right. You're not ready yet, I understand." Hearing this, Ethan's anxious heart settled a bit. He pursed his lips. "Give it some time. Once I've adjusted, I will definitely make it public." Scarlett didn't reply, just stared silently ahead. 3 years, he had always said he was waiting for the right time, but she couldn't wait any longer. How many 3 years does one have in a lifetime? She was truly tired. She looked up and said softly, "Go back. Rachel is still waiting for you." Ethan looked at her distant attitude and wanted to say a few more comforting words, but Rachel's insistent messages on WhatsApp chimed again. He said apologetically to Scarlett, "Scarlett, wait for me to come back." As he closed the car door, she saw his hesitant expression. There was a time when her heart would flutter at his every expression, but now none of it mattered. The car merged into the traffic, the shadows of the sycamore trees along the road dappling the view. From the beginning of the merger, she knew this day would come. It was just a little earlier than expected, so what did it matter? Scarlett closed her eyes gently, letting the night hide her expression. The neon lights outside flickered on and off, much like the moments of the past 3 years. The love in her heart had turned into an obsession over the long course of time, and now she had finally let go of that obsession. Their marriage was a mistake from the beginning, and the one who was wrong eventually has to say goodbye. Chapter 7. In the car on the way back, Scarlett Sutton kept her eyes on her tablet, not saying a word. The data analysis showed that the market value of Stellar Tech was continuously climbing after the merger, which should have been a cause for celebration. Ethan Bancroft looked at her tired profile, recounting the events of the past few weeks. He concluded that the merger must have been too draining, which was why she was so distracted. After a moment's thought, he said, "Next week is the first anniversary of the merger's success, and also our third wedding anniversary. How about a few days in Bali to relax?" Scarlett continued to watch the stock market trends, not looking up. "I haven't been feeling well lately, so let's skip it." "Then what about the golf villa at the Aspen Retreat? The hot springs there are famous." "No." He suggested a few more ideas, but she turned them all down for various reasons. This indifferent attitude was a stark contrast to her former self, whose eyes would light up at the mere mention of a date. Seeing his confused expression, Scarlett put down her tablet. "Let's go to the stock exchange." "The stock exchange?" Ethan frowned. "Isn't that where you first started working?" She smiled. "We can see the trading floor again." The car fell silent again. Scarlett opened her calendar November 7th, the day the divorce agreement would become effective. And November 7th was not only their wedding anniversary, but also the 10th anniversary of their first meeting at the stock exchange. Ending it at such a memorable place seemed fitting, a way to have a proper beginning and end. "You won't stand me up again, will you?" she asked half-jokingly. Ethan smiled wryly. "When have I ever stood you up?" Scarlett didn't answer, just silently counted in her head. The last time was to accompany Rachel Dawson to discuss a merger, leaving her alone in the hospital. The time before that was to help Rachel with an acquisition, missing her own company's IPO celebration. And another time, because of Rachel's investment meeting, he didn't even attend his own company's restructuring meeting. A week later, the autumn sun bathed the entire financial district in golden light. Scarlett changed into a bright yellow long dress and wore an exquisite brooch. Today, she wanted to record their final farewell. Ethan was already waiting downstairs at the office building. Seeing her dressed up, his mood lightened. "Let's take lots of pictures later." They walked into the stock exchange, chatting and laughing. Just as Scarlett was preparing to capture this final farewell, Ethan's phone suddenly rang. Scarlett turned her head and saw his conflicted expression. "Ethan, I'm at the hospital, I need you." It was Rachel's voice. His hand froze. Scarlett turned and saw his conflicted expression. "Something's come up at the office, I have to." "Can it wait half an hour?" she asked softly, already knowing the answer. "No, this is really urgent." He was already gathering his things. She watched him leave quietly, without trying to stop him. Opening her phone, Rachel's social media post appeared on her screen. She was lying pale in a hospital bed, while Ethan held a bowl of porridge, patiently blowing on it to cool it down. The caption read, "Indigestion, thank goodness for you so." This was what Ethan called an important matter. Of course, compared to her, he always had more important things to do. Chapter 8. At that moment, everything was settled. All his excuses were just that, excuses. He had gone to be with Rachel Dawson. Scarlett looked at the social media post and suddenly laughed. For Rachel, who was merely suffering from indigestion, he couldn't even spare her the last hour of their time together. Recalling his hasty departure, she shook her head. "Ethan Bancroft, if you knew this was our last moment, would you still have been in such a rush to leave?" No one could give her an answer, and she no longer expected one. Opening her messaging app, she sent a message to Lawyer Sue. "Lawyer Sue, today is the last day of the cooling-off period. Are there any other procedures?" The reply came quickly. "It's all taken care of. Miss Sutton, from today on, you are a free woman. Congratulations on your new beginning." Rebirth. The word suddenly brought her a sense of release. So this is what letting go felt like. Like shrugging off a heavy burden, yet also like losing all weight, leaving one momentarily unsure how to stand firm. Back in the office, she began to pack up the last traces of her presence. The memories of their shared struggles had now become relics to be cleared away. The first pen he bought for her. The proposal he first reviewed, covered in his firm yet graceful annotations. And the photo of them at the bell-ringing ceremony, him standing by her side, smiling so gently. As she sorted through them, each item seemed to tell a story, whispering of a time that could never be reclaimed. How long is a decade? Long enough for all of one's obsessions to dissolve into a farewell. She folded the letter and placed it under her favorite book. She picked up her already packed luggage. This office, laden with so many memories, would soon welcome a new occupant. "Ethan Bancroft, from this moment on, we have no ties to each other." May you get everything you wish for." She didn't look back as she left. She felt like such a coward, taking a whole decade to finally purge the person who had no room for her in his heart. Meanwhile, Ethan had finally left the hospital. He only relaxed after seeing her social media update. Driving back, he suddenly remembered their appointment. He dialed Scarlett's number, only to find her phone was off. He sent a few messages, but there was no reply. For the first time in 3 years, he couldn't reach her. An inexplicable panic washed over him, and he immediately turned the car around and headed for the company. At this hour, she was probably still in the office, working late. He entered the office to find everything neatly arranged, but all traces of her were gone. He frantically searched every floor, but found nothing. Finally, when a dejected Ethan returned to his office, he saw the letter lying quietly on the desk. "A month ago, the divorce agreement was signed. From today, we are both free. I wish you and Rachel Dawson a bright future, and may I live my own life to the fullest from now on." Every word on the paper was like a sharp blade, stabbing deep into Ethan's heart. His fingers trembled, and he found it hard to breathe. What did she mean the agreement was signed? When was it signed? The car keys in his hand suddenly slipped, clattering onto a stack of files on the desk. The top document was brazenly titled, "Divorce Agreement." His pupils contracted sharply as he shakily flipped to the last page. Scarlett's signature was elegant and free-spirited, and in the signature box on the right, he saw his own handwriting, Ethan Bancroft. In that instant, countless overlooked details flooded his mind like a tidal wave. The day of the merger signing, she said she needed his signature, but she had just come from Lawyer Sue's office. When Lawyer Sue handed over the merger documents, she had a fleeting look of panic when she saw him. All the things she had been gradually getting rid of over the past month were probably memories related to him. Thinking of the new office in the financial district, he finally understood why everything was arranged according to his preferences. She had carried out this elaborate deception right under his nose, making him sign his own divorce papers, and then disappearing without a sound. A surge of anger and panic welled up inside him. Ethan grabbed the agreement and the car keys and rushed to the elevator. Bang! The office door was thrown open, startling Lawyer Sue. "This divorce agreement, did you handle it?" His voice trembled in a way she had never heard before. Chapter 9. Lawyer Sue looked up at the man before her, this titan of industry who was usually so decisive, now in a state of disarray. She quickly put down her coffee. "I did handle it. All the procedures were standard. What's wrong, Mr. Bancroft?" Ethan clutched the agreement tightly, his voice trembling with an unprecedented tremor. "Why didn't you tell me beforehand? This is Scarlett Sutton's divorce case." Time seemed to freeze. His mind went blank, with only the word divorce echoing endlessly. 10 years. They had been together for 10 years. How did it come to this? The question was like a bucket of cold water dumped on Ethan's head. His mind flashed with countless images of her waiting alone, the weekends he had brushed off with "I'm busy with work." The warmth he had taken for granted, all of it, now transformed into sharp blades, stabbing him until he could barely breathe. He finally realized his loss of composure and straightened his suit. He had done this countless times, at every board meeting, at every negotiation table. A perfect appearance was his armor. But this time, he found his hands were shaking. The composure he prided himself on had vanished. The perfect image he had meticulously maintained since childhood had all but crumbled in this moment. All these years, he had been so proud, the youngest CEO, the most successful business elite. But he had forgotten that he had never once fulfilled his duty as a husband. But he had no mind for his image now. Memories flooded back. The day they signed the contract, the weariness in her voice, he only understood it now. Ethan clenched his fists, the divorce agreement in his hand crumpling into a ball. He remembered their past. In every argument, she was always the first to give in, but he had never paid any mind to the sadness in her eyes. How could this be? His voice shook. How could she? But a voice in his heart kept questioning him. How could you have been so blind to her love? How could you have made her wait for so long? Mr. Bancroft. Lawyer Sue was unsure how to address the broken man before her. Ethan vaguely remembered that Scarlett never called him that. She always called him Ethan softly, with a tenderness he now realized he cherished. Why? He looked up, his eyes red. Why would she do this? Tears blurred his vision. He saw countless images of Scarlett dining alone, countless dates he had missed due to work, countless times she had smiled despite her disappointment. Lawyer Sue looked at this usually formidable man, seeing him so vulnerable for the first time. How many times had Scarlett sat in this very spot, calmly discussing the details of her divorce? What kind of heartbreak lay behind that calmness? She sighed. Perhaps it's because she waited too long. The words were like a dull knife, slowly twisting in Ethan's heart. Yes, she had waited for so long. Waited for a glance from him, a word of concern, for him to put down his phone and talk to her. But he was always busy with the next project, the next merger. He had never truly seen her waiting. He staggered back a few steps and collapsed onto the leather sofa. The details he had overlooked now became painfully clear. She had picked him up and dropped him off on time, but he had always changed his schedule at the last minute. She remembered every one of his important events, but he always forgot their anniversaries. She meticulously managed their life together, but he didn't even know what she had been busy with recently. That day, his voice was soft, as if talking to himself. She asked if I wanted to look at the documents. I didn't even glance at them, I just signed. How ironic. His last chance to save his marriage, and he had destroyed it with his own hands. Tears fell silently. How much regret, how much reluctance, how much remorse was in that single tear, only he knew. She said, Lawyer Sue handed him a tissue, it's better to let go voluntarily than to wait to be abandoned. That way, at least you can keep a little dignity. Ethan looked up sharply. She thought I would abandon her? Their wedding anniversary was her last attempt to hold on. So, for a long time, she had known that day would be their last meeting. He was just too slow, only understanding the pain of loss after it was gone. I'm sorry I got too emotional. He took a deep breath. Can you give me her new contact information? Lawyer Sue looked troubled. Well, please, he said, using the word for the first time in his life. Miss Sutton did leave a contact number before she left. Lawyer Sue shook her head gently. But you know, in our line of work, we have confidentiality rules. I can't give it to you, Mr. Bancroft. Ethan clenched his jaw. Yes, he had even concealed their marriage. What right did he have to question others now? What was she like at the end? His voice dropped. Very calm, Lawyer Sue paused. She said, when the time comes, you have to learn to let go. Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the financial center he had built with his own hands. The glass curtain wall sparkled in the sun, but it stung his eyes. Their offices were supposed to be on the top 2 floors. The one with the best view was originally for her. But now, he finally understood why all the blueprints had to be redesigned, why all the renovations had to be replanned. Because from the very beginning, she had never planned to stay. Chapter 10. The lights of the financial district still burned bright in the night. Ethan Bancroft had experienced countless nights like this, but for the first time, he felt a loneliness that cut to the bone. He was in his top-floor office, looking at the darkened windows of the Stellar Tech headquarters across the way. For the first time, he understood what so close, yet so far meant. Ethan stared at the divorce agreement on his desk, and the silk scarf Scarlett had left behind the only thing of hers that remained. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the scarf. It was one she often wore, carrying a faint, woody scent. Suddenly, he remembered many details he had overlooked. She always stood a step behind him, like a silent guardian, and he had never even turned his head. The warmth he took for granted, the thoughtfulness he considered routine, it was all her silent love. His heart suddenly ached, making it hard to breathe. Every time he worked late, the light in his office was always on for him. He remembered often joking with Scarlett. This light is like my life, it never goes out. But now, he realized it wasn't some eternal light, but her stubborn waiting. Whenever he hit a snag in a merger negotiation, the key data would always appear in his inbox just in time. He had thought it was efficiency, professionalism, the execution of his proud team. But now he understood that behind those late-night emails were Scarlett's sleepless nights of effort. How many nights had she fought alone, hidden within those precise data analyses? Even the chair he was sitting in now had been custom-made by her to be ergonomic after she noticed him frequently rubbing his lower back. She remembered even his smallest habits. But what about him? What had he ever done for her? Ring, his phone suddenly rang. It was Rachel Dawson. He looked at the name that once made his heart race, but now it felt strangely unfamiliar. He didn't answer. He began to look through the past month's emails. Every merger document, every project report, bore the marks of her meticulous design. The documents he had signed without a thought, the contracts he had processed without looking up, they were all her farewell. 2 hours ago, all permissions for the management system had automatically transferred to his account. For 3 whole years, from the marriage he had so easily signed into, to the divorce he had unintentionally agreed to, he had never seemed to take this relationship seriously. Mr. Bancroft, his assistant, knocked and entered. "The board wants you to look at this." "Wait," he said suddenly. "Can Scarlett's account still be logged into? She deleted all the code before she left. She said it was for post-merger data security." Another heavy blow. He finally understood what she meant when she said, "Some habits need to be changed." From the code to him, she had already completely deleted him from her heart. The pen holder on his desk was still there. They had picked it out together. During his career's lowest point, she had said, "It's like the stock market. No matter how cold the winter, if you can just get through it, you'll see the spring." But now, it seemed this winter would never see a spring. "Mr. Bancroft," the assistant said cautiously, "Miss Sutton left a USB drive before she left. It was an encrypted file. The password was their wedding date. He opened it with trembling hands. It was a piece of code." The comment read, "This is the company's core technology. What kind of person uses their wedding date as a password while planning to leave, still thinking about his future?" Tears finally fell, uncontrolled. "Ethan Bancroft, oh, Ethan Bancroft, it took you 3 years to realize how happy you were. But now, you've destroyed all that happiness with your own hands." Chapter 11. Scarlett Sutton transfers all her shares and officially resigns from the Stellar Tech Board of Directors. The moment this news broke, the entire financial world was in an uproar. No one understood why the founder would choose to completely exit just after the merger was completed. Ethan Bancroft stood at the press conference, watching the reporters clamor with questions. Is this a malicious sell-off? Is it a sign of dissatisfaction with the Dawson merger? Will Chinese letter Capital take over these shares? He responded mechanically, his eyes fixed on an empty seat in the corner. That was her designated seat on the board. After the conference, he had his team collect all the transfer documents. Going through them one by one, he discovered that she had started planning a month ago, quietly liquidating all her holdings through various accounts. An analyst from an investment bank sent a report. Stellar Tech founders' sell-off has shaken market confidence. A ratings downgrade is recommended. He gave a bitter smile. She had used the most professional financial tactics to leave in front of everyone. But no one knew that what he had lost wasn't market value, but a true heart. Behind those cold numbers was a relationship he had destroyed with his own hands. Lawyer Sue handed him a document. "This is Miss Sutton's final instruction, which she asked me to give you today." It was a transfer agreement, gifting him all of her technology patents, free of charge. The date on the document was exactly 1 month ago. "She said it's your divorce gift," Lawyer Sue paused. "A fair trade, all accounts settled." Ethan's fingers trembled slightly. Scarlett had always been decisive, yet she had spent a whole month planning this departure. He finally understood that she hadn't spent a month because she was reluctant to leave, but because she wanted to handle the separation with dignity. Just like their marriage, always maintaining a perfect facade. That evening, the financial news was still rolling. Stellar Tech founder makes mysterious exit. AI giant Scarlett Sutton's whereabouts a mystery. Bancroft Group issues clarification. Ethan leaned back in his office chair, trying to pinpoint the turning point in the chaotic mess of his memories. Board changes, share transfers, technology handovers, she had planned every step so meticulously. No, it must have started even earlier. He opened all the meeting records from the merger period, his eyes stopping on an investment meeting from 6 months ago. The moment Rachel Dawson appeared, he saw something shatter in Scarlett's eyes. Those eyes, always so sharp, for the first time held an emotion he couldn't understand. Looking back now, it was the look of a woman who had seen through everything. At the time, he was still basking in the joy of the merger, still thrilled to have met a kindred spirit, unaware that every bit of his excitement was a wound to her. After that day, she began to prepare all the handover documents. His fingers trembled as he clicked open the project folder on his computer. So, she had decided to leave back then. Those carefully prepared handover documents, that meticulous exit plan, they were all part of her silent, dignified departure. Ethan held his head in his hands, memories of the past years flooding back. 10 years ago, as the heir to the Bancroft Group, he had taken an interest in this self-made tech genius. He admired her talent, but had never entered her heart. If he had once been attracted to Rachel's enchanting charm, he had actually put those feelings aside in the 3 years after her marriage. But facing Scarlett, who was always watching him, he carried a sense of guilt. Perhaps it was this guilt that led him to choose this marriage. He naively thought that giving her a chance was the best compensation. But he didn't know that more painful than unrequited love is getting someone you shouldn't have. He didn't know that for someone who deeply loved him, such a marriage was the greatest torture. In every merger negotiation, he pursued the perfect valuation, but never seriously calculated the emotional cost. He gave her a marriage certificate, but never his heart. He thought he was giving her a chance, but he didn't know that for her, it was the deepest hurt. After the investment meeting, she had stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, her gaze distant and detached. Some weights can exhaust all courage. At the time, he thought she was talking about the uncertainty of the merger. Now he understood she was talking about their marriage. The woman who had always tolerated and supported him had finally lost her last hope in the endless waiting. Looking out at the late-night city, Ethan questioned himself for the first time. Love was never a business transaction. It doesn't require fairness, it doesn't follow logic, it doesn't ask for returns. But he had used a transaction to hurt the person he should have cherished the most. Perhaps from the beginning, it wasn't his choice that was wrong, but his heart. He filled all the voids in his life with his career for someone else, forgetting that a marriage needs nurturing and a relationship needs cherishing. Only when he lost it did he realize he didn't even have the right to ask her to stay. Chapter 12. As the city lights extinguished one by one into the late night, Ethan Bancroft finally allowed himself to be consumed by his chaotic thoughts. Tears blurred his vision. His once proud decisiveness was worthless in the face of his emotions. For years, he had been invincible in the business world, but in love, he had lost completely. Every decision had been perfect, every move flawless, except in the most important area of his life, where he had made the gravest mistake. He still remembered his apprehension when he suggested a secret marriage, and how Scarlett had agreed almost immediately. Looking back now, what must she have been feeling to agree to such a cruel proposal? Did a flicker of pain cross those usually sharp eyes? At the time, he naively thought it was the best solution. How ridiculous to describe marriage with the word solution. He was accustomed to handling everything with a business mindset, forgetting that love is never a transaction. He didn't know how to forget someone, nor did he know how to love someone. He had stumbled into marriage like an outsider, watching his own life drift by through a series of cold, calculated decisions. Every act of indifference, every moment of distance, had pushed the woman who loved him deeply further away. For these 3 years, he had deliberately kept his distance from Rachel, meeting her only when absolutely necessary. He thought this was being responsible, being faithful, but he forgot that a true marriage requires not restraint, but investment. Habits form without one realizing it. Every time he saw a message from her, he would instinctively pay attention, his emotions stirring without his control. He would unconsciously follow her updates, worry about her troubles, and want to help her. He buried these thoughts deep in his heart, thinking he had hidden them well, but he forgot how perceptive Scarlett was. How could a woman so sharp in the business world not see through his heart? Especially after he learned of Rachel's divorce, he felt an urgent need to help her. Like a drowning man grasping at a straw, he wanted to do something for her. She was someone he had once loved, and even knowing it was impossible now, he still wished for her happiness. He thought he had hidden the feelings behind this concern well, but Scarlett had seen it all clearly. The anger in his heart wasn't just because of her deception. He was angry at Scarlett for leaving without a word, angry at her for acting so unilaterally, angry that she didn't even give him a chance to explain. But most of all, he was angry at himself. Why did he only understand now? Why did he have to wait until he lost her to understand? Small moments suddenly flooded his mind. The late-night snacks she prepared for him in the office, the notes on his desk when he returned from business trips, the warm water she handed him when he was sick. Now that these were all in the past, he realized her shadow was everywhere in his life. Every casual warmth was her silent love. He didn't know when, but her presence had become so natural. Like breathing, like a heartbeat, mundane yet indispensable. And it had taken him far too long to understand that true happiness was right beside him. Even after Rachel's divorce, he had never thought of ending his marriage to Scarlett. Because a long time ago, the moment he held that marriage certificate, the person he wanted to spend the rest of his life with was already Scarlett. He was just too slow, only understanding the pain of loss after it was gone. Chapter 13. It was the third day. Time seemed to have frozen on that number, each minute and second stretching on for an eternity. Ethan Bancroft stared at his phone screen. The familiar number was still switched off. He had lost count of how many times he had dialed it, each time met with the same robotic message, a coldness that brought despair. The sky outside gradually darkened, mirroring the growing panic in his heart. A sense of helplessness crept over him, like a tide engulfing the shore. The whiskey on his desk was long gone. The dozen messages from Rachel Dawson remained unread. He didn't know how to face her, or rather, he didn't know where to begin to explain, until she appeared before him. The familiar face that had once made his heart race now left him feeling strangely calm. "How long has it been since you've rested?" she asked, looking at the stubble on his chin. The concern in her voice was so familiar, yet it no longer stirred any emotion in him. Ethan looked up at the face he had once been infatuated with. In a daze, all his emotions suddenly settled. So this is what it feels like to truly let someone go. Like pulling a thorn from your heart, the wounds have long since scarred over, leaving only an ugly mark. "Do you know where Scarlett went?" he asked, his voice a bit hoarse. The question had been circling in his mind for so long that he could barely bring himself to ask. "Sis Sutton?" Rachel's voice had a slight, imperceptible waver. "I've been looking for her," he heard himself say, his voice sounding as if it came from far away. All the sleepless nights of longing, the guilt with nowhere to go, were condensed into that simple sentence. The glass clinked softly against the desk, the sound sharp in the silent office. Rachel's hand paused. "Because of the shares. Because of me?" Two simple words, yet they held a world of unspoken sorrow. He watched the ice in his glass slowly melt and suddenly laughed. "Did you know we've been married for 3 years?" The office was dead silent. The silence was more powerful than any words, a heavy blow to the heart. Rachel's breath hitched for a moment, and she was speechless for a long time. She remembered their chance encounter, the way Scarlett had looked at her. It wasn't her imagination. Those sharp eyes held so much information she had never understood. "Why?" "Because I was a coward," he cut her off. "Afraid to face it, afraid to admit it, afraid." The rest of his words trailed off into a sigh. All these years, he had locked himself behind a high wall, thinking he could escape all emotion. He took a sip of the whiskey, but without the ice, the alcohol was harsh. Scarlett was like the ice in his drink, silently disappearing, leaving his heart to be burned by the strong liquor, a hole that could never be filled. "That day," Rachel said suddenly, "she asked me if I liked you." The words were a knife, completely shattering Ethan's last line of defense. His fingers trembled, his heart clenched tightly. "I said I didn't know. She just smiled and said it didn't matter because it was already." The unfinished sentence hung in the air like a fog, shrouding all possibilities. Already what? Already too late, already over. Or already let go? "I thought I had hidden it so well," he said in a low voice, full of bitterness. Tears fell silently, spreading a small wet patch on the desk. The disguise he thought was so perfect was so pale in front of someone who truly understood love. Rachel stood up silently. At the door, she paused. "Some people don't disappear, you just never truly saw them." The words were like a hammer, shattering Ethan's final self-deception. The door closed gently. Ethan sat in the empty office, watching the night slowly swallow the city. All his regret and remorse surged up at that moment, drowning him like a tidal wave. He finally understood that the deepest way to hurt someone is not with hate, but with love that is ignored. For all those years, he had hidden his most sincere love in the deepest corner, while the most precious person in his life endured the greatest pain. Chapter 14. On the 7th day of Scarlett's departure, Ethan Bancroft had reached a dead end. He had searched every possible place, contacted every related person, but there was still no news of her. The feeling of helplessness was almost crushing him, but at his lowest point, he found a strange sense of calm. Sober reason told him that even though the cooling-off period was over, the divorce proceedings were not yet complete. Whether it was signing the papers or going to court, she would have to show up eventually. This realization was like a ray of light, illuminating the confusion in his heart. Perhaps this was his last chance. With this thought, he pulled himself together. His first stop after ending his leave of absence was Lawyer Sue's office. During this time, Lawyer Sue had relayed countless messages to him, each one like a thorn in his side. Seeing his haggard face, Lawyer Sue was about to offer some words of comfort. "Help me tell Scarlett," he said first, his voice surprisingly calm, as if he had prepared for the worst. "I agree to the divorce. Tell her to come back and finalize the paperwork." The words were spoken lightly, but they took all his courage. Lawyer Sue nearly spilled her coffee. "You're giving up just like that. You've been together for 10 years. Although she could see how difficult this decision was for him. "She's not willing to communicate. What else can I do?" He forced a smile, bitter and helpless. "I can't just wait for her to sue for divorce, can I?" Only he knew how much pain was hidden behind that smile. Back in his office, he leaned back in his leather chair, the tension in his nerves finally easing. In truth, this was just a tactic. All he wanted was to see her. If she came back, he would have a chance to explain the things he never said, the feelings hidden in his heart. A 10-year relationship should still have a chance of being saved, right? This thought was like a lifeline, giving him the strength to persevere. Meanwhile, Scarlett was enjoying a vacation in Japan. This week, she had been to Japan, Korea, and Thailand, seeing different sights, almost forgetting all her troubles. In every new place, she would think, what would it be like if I were here with him? But she would quickly suppress the thought, until the message from Lawyer Sue arrived. He agreed to the divorce. The words were like a splash of cold water, waking her from her feigned calm. Looking at her phone screen, she suddenly felt uncertain. The man who had been relentlessly harassing her these past few days, how could he suddenly be so decisive? The man who never easily admitted defeat, how could he give up so easily? To be safe, she asked about the procedure in detail. When she learned that both parties had to be present to finalize it, otherwise it would have to go to court, she sighed in frustration. She just wanted to end a relationship. Why was it so difficult? The years of accumulated feelings, the shared memories, had now become the heaviest burden. As she packed her bags, she looked at her booked itinerary and reluctantly canceled it. The sights she had been looking forward to could not compare to the ties of reality. The next morning, she landed at the familiar airport, the air filled with a scent she knew all too well. Assistant Smith was already waiting. The moment she saw her, she exclaimed, "Miss Sutton, you've lost so much weight." The days of avoidance had left her looking a bit haggard. "I'm on a diet, can't you see my sharp jawline?" she joked, trying to hide her unease. But her lightheartedness vanished when the conversation turned to Ethan. "Whether he's sincere or not, I'm getting this done this time. If he backs out, we'll go to court." That would be very time-consuming. "I know," she said, looking out the window, her voice full of frustration. "That's why I came back in a hurry, to end what needs to be ended, sooner rather than later." Chapter 15. On the 15th day of Scarlett's departure, Ethan Bancroft finally received a message from her. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m., meet in the lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel." Just a few words, but they made his heart race. After a month of waiting, he finally had a chance to meet her. He arrived half an hour early and sat on a sofa by the floor-to-ceiling window. Sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating the freshly printed divorce agreement in his hand. Every word was glaring. He had signed it himself, but now it felt like a sharp sword piercing his heart. At 8:55, the elevator doors opened. Scarlett walked out, heading straight for him without a glance to the side. She had lost some weight in the past 2 weeks, but it only made her look more refined. The face he had longed to see day and night now wore a strangeness that pained him. "Did you bring your documents?" she asked, sitting down opposite him, her tone as calm as if she were discussing a business project. The distance in her voice cut him like a knife. When had the gentle woman he knew learned such coldness? Ethan looked up at her, trying to find a trace of familiar warmth in her eyes. "We haven't seen each other in so long, and this is all you want to talk about." His voice trembled, a tremor he hadn't even noticed himself. "What else?" She tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The familiar gesture now seemed so distant. Should we make small talk about our lives, discuss the weather? Can we talk? Just for a bit. His voice was pleading, desperate to seize this last chance. We can talk after the paperwork is done. She cut him off, her voice firm and non-negotiable. The woman who had once been so compliant had finally learned to say no. I didn't bring my documents, he heard himself say, his voice sounding as if it came from far away. Scarlett stood up. Then we'll do it another day. Her movements were still graceful, but they held no warmth. Please, he grabbed her wrist, the warmth of her skin almost bringing him to tears. Let me explain. The words were squeezed out from between his teeth. The once proud and arrogant man had learned to bow his head for the first time. The warmth from his touch made her stiffen slightly. She looked down at his well-defined hand. For a moment, she seemed to waver, but then her coldness returned. Mr. Bancroft, she slowly pulled her hand away, her tone even colder. The most basic rule in business is that a missed opportunity never comes back. Explanations are just a waste of both our time. Each word was calculated, hitting him precisely where it hurt. Scarlett, he called her name, his voice filled with endless reluctance. Stop acting, she turned to leave. We're both busy. Let's just meet at City Hall next time. The words were like a death sentence for their relationship. But if we don't finalize the paperwork within 30 days... He tried to argue, but she cut him off again. Stop quoting legal clauses. She stopped but didn't turn around, her voice filled with suppressed pain. Since you don't love me, why are you still bothering me? Are you not satisfied with the property settlement? The sun was still shining brightly, but it could no longer reach his heart. Ethan watched her determined back, suddenly understanding that some things, once lost, can never be found again. Chapter 16. Ethan looked at the ice in his glass and spoke softly, his voice tinged with a weakness he had never shown before. Scarlett, what do you really want? Each word seemed to be squeezed from the depths of his heart. The once proud man had now learned to be humble. I want a divorce. Hearing her cold voice, Ethan's heart broke. I didn't mean anything else, I just what? Her voice was cold, like a sharp knife, cutting off all his expectations. I just want to understand why it has come to this. He looked up, his eyes filled with pleading. Why won't you give me a chance? The unspoken words, the unexpressed feelings, were all condensed in that sentence. Scarlett stared at him for a long time, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. This man, who was so formidable in the business world, was now showing unprecedented vulnerability. For a moment, she almost softened, but then she remembered the painful days and nights. Understand what? She sneered, her voice laced with bitterness. You chose Rachel Dawson. Isn't that obvious enough? Each word was a reminder to herself not to be weak. It's not like that. He clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white. You've misunderstood. The explanation came too late to mend the cracks in her heart. Misunderstood? She cut him off, her tone even colder. I'm just stating the facts. The lonely nights of waiting, the emotions he couldn't hide in his eyes, they were the best evidence. In that moment, Ethan suddenly understood something. All her decisiveness stemmed from the misunderstanding he had never explained. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his voice steady. I've read all the letters. You think I still care about Rachel, don't you? Don't you? The question made his heart ache with a sour bitterness. The feelings he thought he had hidden so well for all these years had been seen through by her all along. He forced himself to look her in the eye. I'm sorry, it's my fault. I should have made things clear a long time ago. It was my avoidance that caused you to misunderstand for so long. Every word was filled with regret, but some mistakes, once made, can never be undone. There's nothing to say, she stood up, straightening her clothes as if to shake off all unwanted feelings. Since you've made a new choice, let's part on good terms. As she turned to leave, he suddenly spoke, his voice filled with an unprecedented sincerity. I truly wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. The words seemed to take all his courage. Scarlett's steps faltered. She turned back, studying his face carefully, as if to confirm the truth of his words. That momentary pause gave him a glimmer of hope. You know, she chuckled, but her smile was bitter. The scariest thing isn't when someone lies, but when they lie to themselves. Do you really believe what you just said? Ethan was stung by the coldness in her eyes, but persisted. From the day she got married, I decided to let go. You gave me a home, you showed me what warmth is, what? He wanted to say love, but the word wouldn't come out. Don't say any more. She cut him off again, her voice filled with an unprecedented weariness. Good acting, but it's too late. Rachel is single now. Once our divorce is finalized, you two can be together without any burdens. Each word was a reminder to herself not to be weak. How can you be so sure? His voice was filled with despair, but he couldn't go on. Because I see it very clearly. She looked out at the night sky, her eyes holding a pain he couldn't understand. For these past 3 years, you never had me in your eyes. Chapter 17. What are you best at? Scarlett suddenly asked him. The question came out of nowhere, a sharp sword aimed straight at his heart. Ethan was stunned. What? He looked at her suddenly stern expression, a sense of unease rising in him. Investment analysis, she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. You're best at seeing through the essence of a company, but you've looked at me for 3 years and still haven't seen the real me. The word sent a pang of pain through Ethan's heart. He finally realized that this sarcastic woman before him was the real Scarlett Sutton. The gentle, considerate Scarlett was just a facade she had created to maintain their relationship. I know I have no right to say anything anymore. His voice was full of regret, but it couldn't change anything. It's too late to say anything. She picked up her teacup, her eyes fixed on the window. To her now, anything was more interesting than the man in front of her. You should know that a missed opportunity never comes back, and neither do people. Ethan looked at her profile, his heart suddenly clenching in pain. This Scarlett was a world away from the person in his memory who always gave in to him, who tolerated his willfulness. The memory of her always gentle eyes, her endlessly tolerant demeanor, suddenly felt so foreign. But on second thought, which one was the real her? How could a tech giant who dominated the business world have such a gentle personality? Her 3 years of accommodation were just to maintain a relationship she thought was worth fighting for. And what about him? He had taken all her efforts for granted. The late-night waits, the silent concerns, the suppressed grievances, he had chosen to ignore them all. Not only that, but he had repeatedly rubbed salt in her wounds. He had used work to deflect her expectations, working overtime to escape her tenderness, and Rachel's affairs to wear down her confidence. This realization cut him like a knife. He could feel the blood pounding in his veins, every heartbeat screaming in pain. Her tolerance and accommodation were just the sacrifices she made to maintain their marriage. A wave of bitterness washed over him. How much had she endured over these 3 years to suppress her sharp personality into that gentle facade? So it wasn't that he couldn't see, but that he had habitually chosen to ignore it. He had taken all her efforts for granted and even repeatedly used Rachel's affairs to wear down her confidence until she completely lost faith in their relationship. The concern that showed whenever he thought of Rachel, the unconscious emotional fluctuations whenever her name was mentioned, these were the time bombs he had personally planted in their marriage. This realization was like a scalpel, precisely dissecting his heart. Pain spread from every nerve ending, making it almost impossible to breathe. The warmth he thought would never change, the tolerance he took for granted, he had destroyed it all with his own hands. Ethan Bancroft, remember to bring all your documents next time. She stood up, her tone distant. Don't make any more excuses next time we meet. For 3 years, he had personally pushed away the person he should have cherished most, and naively thought he could still win her back. Ethan's voice trembled as he swallowed his pride and said, Scarlett, can you give me a little more time? He clenched his fists. To prove. Ethan Bancroft, she cut him off, her voice colder than ever. What do you want to prove? You've already wasted 3 years. Don't waste any more of our future. Ethan watched her straight back, suddenly wanting to ask how she had endured all this for the past 3 years. But he no longer had the right. It was all his own doing. He had personally pushed their most precious relationship into the abyss. Chapter 18. When Scarlett Sutton turned back, she saw Ethan Bancroft leaning against the doorframe, gasping for breath. She narrowed her eyes. This man, always so decisive, what kind of act was he putting on now, and for whom? Not feeling well. She walked over, her voice laced with clear suspicion. She had seen too many performances over the years. Ethan's current vulnerability was just another act in her eyes. Ethan heard the doubt in her words, a sourness welling up in his heart. He shook his head and stood up straight. No need to wait for next time. The documents are in the car. Let's go and get it done today. Under Scarlett's questioning gaze, he smiled bitterly. Shall we go? Only when he pushed the door open did she let her guard down and follow him. The elevator was silent, so quiet you could hear both of them breathing. Scarlett kept checking her watch, afraid of missing their appointment. Her eagerness stung Ethan's eyes. As soon as they got out of the car, she even took his arm and hurried forward. The sudden contact made Ethan's heart skip a beat, instantly reminding him of the scene from 3 years ago. She had been just as eager then, clinging to his arm as if afraid he would back out. He had been preoccupied at the time, only smiling when he saw her nervousness, which had lessened his own resistance. Who would have thought that the two people who had walked into the bonds of matrimony would be here today to sign it all away? The warmth he had taken for granted, the love he had ignored, had now turned into deep regret. Looking at the crowds coming and going in City Hall, he suddenly felt that an ending wasn't so terrible after all. Since she was convinced it was a mistake, let it end here. He wouldn't force someone to stay who didn't want to, but from today on, he would watch over her in a different capacity. This time, it was his turn to chase after her. Maybe she wouldn't give him a chance like he had given her back then, but it didn't matter. He was willing to wait another 10 years or even the rest of his life. Because when he said, "I do," he had already chosen this person. He had just understood it too late. Love is never a given. By the time the paperwork was done, it was rush hour. Scarlett looked at the new divorce certificate, breathing a sigh of relief. That moment of ease pained Ethan, but it also strengthened his resolve to start over. "Well, thanks for the past 3 years. See you around," she said, turning to leave, her voice full of unconcealed relief. "Who said we're just going to see each other around?" He suddenly grabbed her hand. This time, he wouldn't let go so easily. Scarlett looked down at the divorce certificate in her hand. Then she looked up at him, her eyes full of confusion. "Is it not over yet?" "The marriage is over, but we have other relationships." Her voice was firm, without a hint of hesitation. "What other relationship could we possibly have?" she sneered, her eyes filled with undisguised sarcasm. "At the very least, we're still friends who have known each other for 10 years, right?" He looked directly into Scarlett's eyes, his gaze filled with an unprecedented determination. "I remember you said that after the divorce we could talk about anything." Chapter 19. Scarlett remembered now. She had indeed said that, but it was just to get him to finalize the paperwork quickly. Who would have thought he'd take it seriously? This man was truly persistent. "I did say that, but I didn't say right now." She shrugged nonchalantly. "Some other time." "When is some other time?" Ethan didn't let go, his voice tinged with a stubbornness she had never heard before. "Are you going to disappear without a word again, like last time?" The words hit a nerve. Scarlett's eyes flickered, and she instinctively looked away. The days of deliberate avoidance, the late-night reluctance, it was all laid bare in that one sentence. "You've already changed all your contact information anyway," he continued, his tone flat and emotionless. "If we weren't in the same circles, I probably wouldn't even be able to find a trace of you." Every word precisely cut through her defenses. Scarlett's heart sank. She had done that, and more than once. Every time she thought of him, she would instinctively choose to flee, to escape the attachments she shouldn't have. "Is your word so worthless?" His voice suddenly rose, a slight tremor in it. Scarlett frowned, her tone turning cold. "Are you questioning me?" She instinctively put up her guard, but his next words made her defenses crumble. "I wouldn't dare," Ethan smiled faintly. "I just wanted to remind you that you once taught me to be a person of my word." Scarlett was speechless. Her own teachings had become a sword turned against her, leaving her with no escape. She took a deep breath and finally relented. "Fine, what do you want to talk about?" "I heard you're going to the UK?" His voice was soft, but every word was clear. "Is it to avoid me?" The question was a heavy blow, hitting her where she was most vulnerable. Scarlett's fingers paused, the cup clinking against the marble tabletop. She looked up, her gaze sharp. "Are you interrogating me?" "Just concerned," Ethan smiled faintly. "After all, we've known each other for so many years. We should have a proper farewell." "Proper?" Scarlett scoffed, her voice filled with unconcealed sarcasm. "Isn't saying goodbye at the steps of City Hall proper enough?" Ethan wasn't provoked by her sarcasm. Instead, he took a step closer. "If you think it's so proper, why are you deliberately avoiding me? Why run so far away?" The words were like a needle, precisely pricking Scarlett's sore spot. She stood up, her voice filled with suppressed anger. "I'm not running away. Aren't you?" Ethan tilted his head. "Then why leave in such a hurry?" The spacious cafe fell silent, only the constantly changing colors of the neon lights outside casting shifting shadows on their faces. The unspoken words, the suppressed emotions, all swirled in the silence. "You're very well informed," Scarlett sneered, "but this has nothing to do with you anymore." Her tone was full of finality. "You're right, it doesn't," he nodded. "But are you planning to leave without a word?" Scarlett frowned. "Do I need to report my comings and goings to you?" Her voice was clearly impatient. "No, you don't," he shook his head. "And I'm not trying to bother you. I just think some things need to be said. Didn't we say everything we needed to at the cafe today?" Her tone grew colder. "Today was all about what you think." Ethan straightened his suit and walked in front of her, forcing her to meet his gaze. Chapter 20. "Ethan Bancroft, you don't actually think I still care about what you think, do you?" Scarlett forced a calm demeanor, but she couldn't meet his eyes. The autumn in New York was always unpredictable. Just as Scarlett turned to leave, the sky opened up, a downpour cascading down as if to wash away all reluctance. Ethan watched her annoyed expression and smiled, a warmth spreading through him. "It's about to rain. Did you drive?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Taxi," Scarlett snapped, her tone full of unconcealed irritation. "It's hard to get a cab here." He paused, his voice gentle. "If you don't mind, I can give you a ride." She didn't answer, turning to walk outside, but she stopped at the curtain of rain. "It's about to be a storm out there." His voice came from behind her, with a hint of a smile. "I'm willing to get wet, it's none of your business." Though she said this, her feet wouldn't move. Ethan watched her frozen back, a slight smile on his lips. This woman, she could never change her habit of being tough on the outside and soft on the inside. Some habits are a tenderness ingrained over many years. The car was quiet, only the sound of raindrops hitting the windshield. The rain grew heavier, drumming a dense rhythm on the roof, like a symphony of longing. In the enclosed space, even their breathing became audible, the unspoken words solidifying in the air. Ethan watched the raindrops slide down the windshield and suddenly smiled. "Do you remember our first date?" His voice was nostalgic. "Don't talk about useless things." Scarlett's voice was cold, as if resisting something. "It was a rainy day just like this," he continued as if he hadn't heard her. "You forgot your umbrella and insisted on taking off your jacket to shield me from the rain. You ended up with a fever the next day, but you said you didn't regret it at all." The warm memories dripped onto his heart like raindrops. Scarlett's fingers tightened slightly. The memories she had deliberately sealed away suddenly flooded her mind, her heartbeat quickening uncontrollably. She tried to force herself to forget, but every detail was so vivid. "Ethan Bancroft," she took a deep breath, her voice a warning, "we're divorced." "Yes, we're divorced," he nodded, his tone calm. "But Scarlett, a divorce doesn't mean the past never existed. Those beautiful memories, those sincere moments, are you just going to deny them so easily?" The car was silent for a few seconds. The sound of the rain was particularly clear in the momentary silence. Scarlett turned her head, her gaze sharp. "What are you trying to say?" Her voice held a hint of wavering. "What I'm trying to say is," Ethan looked directly into her eyes, his gaze more determined than ever, "you keep saying you don't care, so why are you still using the phone I bought you? You say you want to cut all ties, so why do you still have the things I gave you? You said you never want to see me again, so why did you get in my car?" This barrage of questions was like a sharp sword, aimed straight at Scarlett's heart. She looked away, her voice a little hoarse. "They're just habits." Even she couldn't convince herself with that excuse. "Are they?" Ethan chuckled. "Then do you know what my habits are?" Before she could answer, he continued, "I have a habit of not giving up easily. Just like when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy, everyone said I couldn't do it, but I persisted. It's the same now. I won't easily give up on the person I've chosen." Scarlett turned her head sharply, meeting his determined gaze. The sound of the rain on the car window seemed to fade into the distance. All she could hear was his soft voice. "Give me a chance and give yourself a chance, okay?" Chapter 21. "No." After a long silence, Scarlett finally spoke. "Ethan Bancroft, it seems you've always been like this. When you were with me, you couldn't let go of Rachel Dawson. Now that we're divorced, you're starting to chase me." Scarlett laughed coldly, her words cruel. "Ethan Bancroft, is it only after you've lost something that you remember to pursue it?" The red light turned just then, and Ethan was forced to brake. Scarlett's actions were faster than he had anticipated. By the time he tried to stop her from getting out of the car, she had already opened the door. His desperate voice shattered behind her. He had said something forcefully, but it was lost in the sound of her closing the door. Scarlett had booked a flight for the next day, something she had arranged upon her return. Her immigration papers were already processed. Before coming back, she had thought it through. Even if Ethan disagreed, or if the divorce process was difficult, she wouldn't waste any more time on him. Even if he kept pestering her, even if he insisted on taking it to court, she had a plan. She would entrust everything to Lawyer Sue. The streets were empty in the downpour, the sycamore trees along the road swaying violently in the wind and rain. Scarlett randomly chose a cafe to take shelter, but she never expected to see someone she thought she would never meet again. Rachel Dawson. A month had passed, and she looked much more haggard than before, the exhaustion in her eyes impossible to hide. The waiter brought her a coffee, but she just stared at the steam rising from the cup, lost in thought. It wasn't until she heard footsteps that she seemed to wake from a dream and looked up. "Sis Sutton?" Rachel recognized her almost instantly and stood up, a little flustered. "Don't call me sis. You can call me by my name if you like." Scarlett sat down opposite her and motioned for the waiter to bring another coffee. She studied the woman in front of her, frowning slightly. This worn-out version of Rachel was a world away from the glamorous, poppy-like woman she remembered. Neither of them was talkative, and for a while only soft music filled the air. The couple at the next table was laughing softly, making the silence even more awkward. Finally, it was Rachel who broke the silence. "Scarlett, I've been wanting to find a chance to apologize to you." "Apologize?" Scarlett raised an eyebrow, tapping her finger lightly on the rim of her coffee cup. "For what?" "The last time we met, I didn't know about your relationship with Ethan, and I said a lot of things I shouldn't have." Rachel's voice was full of guilt, her eyes darting away, unable to meet hers. "I'm really sorry." Scarlett watched her expression for a moment before speaking. "We chose to keep our marriage a secret. It's normal that you didn't know." "No, it's not just that." Rachel's fingers curled, the coffee cup clinking against the saucer. I actually knew about Ethan's feelings for me a long time ago, but I pretended not to know. Then I got married, and my marriage fell apart. He helped me get through it. I once thought he still liked me, and I even had some inappropriate thoughts. "So what's your relationship now?" Scarlett suddenly cut her off, her gaze as sharp as a knife. Rachel was taken aback, then gave a bitter smile. "Like a brother and sister, that's all we can ever be." She looked up, meeting Scarlett's eyes. Actually, I could feel that he had changed. Maybe without realizing it, he had already let go of his feelings for me. I can feel that the way he looks at me is no different from how he looks at a sister. "Why didn't you make it clear to him?" Scarlett's voice was cold. "Because by the time I realized the truth, it was too late." Rachel's voice choked. "Watching him search for you like a madman, I finally understood that he had truly fallen in love with you. And I was no longer that special person in his heart. Scarlett, did you know? He's lost a lot of weight recently. He looks completely worn out. I've never seen him like this, not even when I got married back then. He wasn't this devastated." Scarlett's fingers paused on the coffee cup, a flicker of something imperceptible in her eyes. "Are you so sure?" "Of course I'm sure." Rachel looked directly into her eyes, her tone growing more earnest. "Scarlett, give him a chance and give yourself a chance. Don't let a misunderstanding ruin a relationship that was so hard to achieve. And," she paused, "do you really not care about him at all anymore?" Chapter 22. Scarlett didn't answer immediately. The rain outside began to subside, and sunlight slowly pierced through the clouds, casting a long shadow on the table. Her gaze fell on the now cold coffee, her thoughts drifting far away. The memories she thought she had put behind her now came flooding back like a tidal wave. "You don't believe me?" Rachel asked softly. Looking at Scarlett, she suddenly understood why the ever-proud Ethan Bancroft was so persistent. Scarlett had such a rational and extreme personality. Yet, for those 3 years, she had been willing to force herself into a gentle and considerate mold for Ethan's sake. No one would willingly let go of such unabashed love. "It's not that I don't believe you." After a long silence, Scarlett finally spoke. Her voice was low. "It's just that with matters of the heart, who can ever be sure?" Every word was laced with a deep weariness, a skepticism born from being worn down by life too many times. "Are you doubting his sincerity?" Rachel looked at her, her eyes full of confusion. In her opinion, Ethan's change was already obvious enough. Scarlett's lips twisted into a bitter smile, filled with a deep sense of resignation. If sincerity were so easy to see, there wouldn't be so many regrets in this world. The years of waiting and disappointment were all condensed into that one helpless sigh. But Scarlett, Rachel leaned forward, her tone sincere. Some things can't be hidden. After you disappeared, he searched for you day and night. That doesn't prove anything, Scarlett's voice was low. Then tell me, Rachel looked directly into her eyes, what would prove it? The question hit its mark. Scarlett was speechless. She had grown so accustomed to Ethan's neglect. His relentless pursuit was an experience she had never had in their decade-long relationship. She pursed her lips, unable to find a suitable rebuttal. Scarlett, let go of your prejudices. Rachel's voice was soft, but every word struck a chord in her heart. The most precious thing in a relationship is when both people are committed. Since you both still care for each other, why not give each other a chance? We're already over, Scarlett's voice was a little hoarse. Are you? Rachel smiled weakly. Then why do your eyes always flicker away whenever he's mentioned? Stop lying to yourself, Scarlett. You can't let him go. Scarlett shot up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. The feelings she had buried so deep were now on the verge of breaking free. She took a deep breath. This conversation ends here. Thank you for your honesty today. What happens next is between him and me. You have no right to interfere. Wait, Rachel stood up too. One last question. Scarlett's steps faltered, her heart pounding uncontrollably. If you had known back then that I was just like a sister to Ethan, would you still have chosen to divorce him? Chapter 23. The conversation with Rachel Dawson lingered in Scarlett Sutton's mind, like a seed taking root and sprouting. In the VIP lounge, she stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the planes take off and land in the distance, her thoughts in turmoil. Each plane seemed to carry her thoughts far away, yet also brought her back to the memories she didn't want to face. Miss Sutton, your ticket and visa are ready. Assistant Smith handed her the folder, hesitating for a moment before adding, her voice full of reluctance, Are you really sure about this? You're never coming back. Scarlett took the folder without a word. Though she would never admit it, her departure was, in part, an escape. She needed to leave, to find an environment where she could calm down. But how much reluctance was hidden in that calmness, even she couldn't say for sure. Only Assistant Smith saw her off. As Scarlett walked into the VIP channel, her assistant's nagging reminders echoed in her ears, reminiscent of someone else's concern for her years ago. Remember to eat on time, don't work too hard, contact me if you need anything, call me if you need something. I'm going to London, not to a deserted island, Scarlett said with a hint of helplessness. There's no need to be so nervous. Last time you went to Tokyo on business, I didn't hear from you for a week. I almost called the police. This time you're emigrating, how can I not be worried? Assistant Smith's words were full of concern. Scarlett laughed. That was because I was in the middle of a merger negotiation. I was very busy. On that trip, she had indeed buried herself in work, trying to forget certain things. That's why I need to remind you even more this time, Assistant Smith said seriously. Don't just lock yourself in the office. Remember, time to board, Scarlett cut her off, turning towards the security checkpoint. Some reminders brought back too many memories. After security, she took off her bracelet and placed it in the tray, her peripheral vision catching a familiar figure. The sight made her heart skip a beat. She turned her head sharply, but only saw a sea of unfamiliar faces. Must have been mistaken, she muttered to herself, but still sent a message to Assistant Smith. What has Ethan Bancroft been busy with lately? She didn't even realize the unconscious concern in her question. Mr. Bancroft applied for a transfer yesterday. It seems he's going to be based in London. I don't know the specifics. Seeing the message, Scarlett's heart leaped. That familiar sense of unease returned. She hurried towards the boarding gate, but as she was looking for her seat, she heard a familiar voice. Excuse me, the voice made her freeze. Scarlett slowly turned around and met a pair of smiling eyes. Time seemed to stand still, all her attempts to escape crumbling in that moment. Ethan Bancroft stood behind her, a perfectly feigned look of surprise on his face. What a coincidence! His tone was light, but it made her heart race. What are you doing here? Her voice was cold, trying to hide her inner turmoil. Going to London, he said, waving his ticket. Same flight as you, it seems. His smile held a hint of knowing, like a strategist who had already seen everything. Scarlett stared at his seat number, knowing full well this was no coincidence. This man never easily gave up on what he wanted. Chapter 24. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the faint sound of breathing. Ethan Bancroft turned his head, looking at the profile of the woman beside him, who was deliberately feigning sleep. Her brow was slightly furrowed, her eyelashes trembling, clearly still troubled by their earlier conversation. He couldn't help but think back to 3 years ago, when they had just gotten married. She was the same then. Whenever he came home late from work, she would sit on the sofa, pretending to read, but her eyes would be secretly glancing at the door. And he had always turned a blind eye, even deliberately avoiding her concern. Looking back now, those small acts of tenderness, those restrained glances, the expectations he had ignored, had all unknowingly piled up into today's finality. Ethan looked away and sighed softly. Since she wasn't willing to listen now, he would wait. This time, it was his turn to wait for her, to wait for the day she was willing to turn back. The 2-hour flight passed quickly. By the time the plane landed at the New York airport, it was already dawn. Ethan followed behind Scarlett, watching her deftly retrieve her luggage and stride towards the exit. She walked quickly, as if trying to shake something off. Ethan, however, followed at a leisurely pace, his eyes fixed on her straight back. He had once ignored this back, but now he couldn't tear his eyes away. "Scarlett Sutton," he called out just as she was about to get into a taxi. She stopped but didn't turn around. "Everything that needed to be said has been said. Are you still going to pester me?" The coldness in her voice was like a knife, but it couldn't cut through his determination. He took a step forward. "Not everything. The past 3 years, we can write them off. But the 7 years before that, and the rest of our lives, we still have a lot to talk about." "What's there to talk about?" she sneered. "Isn't it just that you foolishly chased me for 7 years, and then we go our separate ways for the rest of our lives?" Her voice sounded calm, but it was laced with deep pain. Ethan watched her quietly, suddenly remembering that night 10 years ago. She had stood in front of the library, confessing her feelings to him with a hint of shyness. But he had only replied with a thank you and turned to leave. At the time, he thought that would be enough to make her give up. But Scarlett had stubbornly said, "You don't like me now, but the future is uncertain. Ethan Bancroft, don't be so quick to judge." He had been so carefree then, even secretly laughing at her foolishness. But looking back now, that determined figure in the night, that stubborn promise, had been quietly etched into his memory. The past is set in stone, but the future is uncertain. "Scarlett Sutton, don't be so quick to judge." The words hit Scarlett's heart with force. She spun around, her gaze sharp, searching his face for any hint of a joke. But Ethan's eyes were incredibly firm. In the faint light of dawn, his gaze was crystal clear, as if he intended to make up for the neglect of the past 7 years and the distance of the last 3 with the rest of his life. Years ago, he had ended their story with a single, indifferent thank you. But Ethan had never expected that this determined woman would spend a full 7 years, with countless chance encounters and the most gentle patience, to gently erase that ending. Although their marriage had started in a hurry and ended decisively. It was during these 3 years that he had slowly come to see his own heart and to see her goodness. The tenderness he had once ignored, the expectations he had overlooked, the deep love he had never reciprocated in the days after their divorce, they had all become the deepest ache in his heart. The sunlight gradually brightened, casting a soft glow on their figures. Ethan watched as Scarlett's tense jawline slowly softened. He knew she was wavering, because he knew her too well, her stubbornness, her pride, and the heart that had never truly let go. This time, it was his turn to wait for her to come back, with more time than 7 years, with more patience than before, to complete this unfinished story. Chapter 25. Ethan lowered his gaze, his voice soft. "Scarlett, don't be so quick to refuse me. How about we make a bet?" "What kind of bet?" Scarlett frowned. "If I can find you before tonight," he looked up, meeting her eyes directly, "you have to agree to one request of mine." Scarlett sneered. "You think that's possible?" "Let's try," he smiled faintly. "You have nothing to lose, right? And what if you lose?" "If I lose," his voice was soft but every word was clear, "I will never appear before you again." Scarlett stared at him for a long time, as if trying to confirm the sincerity of his words. Finally, she nodded. "All right, it's a deal." Just as Ethan turned to leave, she suddenly asked, "You seem very sure you'll win. You don't need to know why." When Ethan turned and walked away, his palms were sweating. The cold wind blew away his last shred of luck and the courage he had been faking. This city was so big. How much luck would it take to find someone who was determined to leave in a sea of people? The 9 o'clock bus slowly pulled away. He watched the fleeting neon lights outside the window, his fingers tapping unconsciously on the handrail. Where would she go? A hotel? A cafe? Or? A thought suddenly struck him. He pressed the stop bell. The lights were still on in the coffee shop. He pushed open the door, his eyes instinctively drawn to the seat she always took. It was empty, with only an unfinished Americano left behind. The waiter came to clear the cup and he stopped him. "This coffee, when was it from?" "From the lady who was just here. She said she wouldn't be back." His heart sank. He looked up at the clock. 11:40. His heart began to race. The last chance. He ran through the empty streets, the sound of his leather shoes echoing in the night. Passers-by stared, but he didn't care. As he turned the corner, a beautiful melody drifted from a piano store. It was that nocturne, but with a new sense of finality. He stood at the crosswalk, watching the seconds tick by, his heart pounding with anxiety, tears welling up in his eyes. Thank goodness the heavens were on his side. At 11:59, Ethan pushed open the door to the piano room. The piano music stopped abruptly. The person at the piano looked up. As their eyes met, Ethan broke down. Because the person playing the piano was not Scarlett. The person saw him, said nothing, closed the piano lid, picked up an umbrella from the corner, and left. Ethan stood in the empty piano room. The piano stood silently in the moonlight. On the piano lid was a lone cell phone. He had installed a tracking app on that phone, which was why he had been so confident before. But now he knew he had lost completely. "Scarlett," he said softly, his voice choked with a sob he had never known before. "So, you really can be this heartless." The sound of the rain outside faded, and tears blurred his vision. He slowly leaned against the piano, letting his thoughts drift back to the past that could never be reclaimed. He looked out at the night, his voice choked. "I was so stupid, knowing you were leaving, yet still holding on to that little bit of hope. I thought if I just tried hard enough, I could find you. But," the tears finally broke free, "but you wouldn't even give me the chance to say goodbye in person." The clock struck 12. The piano room was filled with his suppressed sobs. The once mighty man was now curled up in a corner like a lost child. "Scarlett," his voice was barely audible, "I was wrong. Your destination was never London." The rain outside stopped, and the quiet piano room amplified the brokenness in his voice. "How could I forget? You never liked the rainy season, and London, it always rains." Chapter 26. As the plane climbed through the clouds, golden light streamed onto Scarlett Sutton's face. Even without seeing Ethan Bancroft's despair, she could imagine it. But she no longer cared. She knew why he had been so sure he would win. The last time they met, he had installed a tracking app on her phone. Ethan seemed to have always been so certain of her feelings for him, as if all their post-divorce entanglements were just a part of their lovers' games. But she had long grown tired of his endless pestering. Scarlett knew that when Ethan saw that phone, he would probably truly break down. But she no longer cared. She had already compromised for him for 3 years. From now on, she would be the real Scarlett Sutton. She breathed a cloud of mist onto the window and wrote the word, "goodbye," with her finger. These 2 words were not a farewell to Ethan. They were a farewell to the self who had once compromised so much. From now on, she would no longer have to suppress her feelings for anyone. This time, she was going to live a life that truly belonged to Scarlett Sutton.